So the author said the fifth integral is to wash the feet, including the ankles, which are the two protruding bones between the foot and the shin. Each foot has two ankles. Or else, i.e., in the case of the foot, one has the option to wet wipe the foot gear. Therefore, washing the feet is not obligatory if one has what are called Khuffs on his feet. However, one can only wipe upon them instead of washing the feet when the conditions of the foot gear are fulfilled. If they are not fulfilled, then one must wash his feet. Know that washing the feet is better than wiping the Khuffs, but one can wipe the Khuffs, whether male or female, and even for no reason whatsoever, if they are valid. To be valid, they must be pure, therefore they cannot be made of filth, such as untanned skin or dog or pig skin, even if it was tanned, the dog or pig skin. Has to be durable. Therefore, they must be able to withstand constant walking without tearing. And they must prevent the penetration of water. It's said that way because it seems there's a difference between water resistant and waterproof. Waterproof means absolutely no water gets through. Water resistant is not to that extent. So the Khuffs need to be water resistant. They must prevent the penetration of water. The scholars gave the example of a traveler who descends from his animal and goes back and forth to fulfill his errands, such as collecting firewood and pitching a tent. From this it is known that socks are not valid Khuffs. Whoever wants to wipe upon socks as Khuffs following Imam Ahmed must adhere to the conditions of his school. Doesn't work in Shafi'i school. They must be worn after the complete wudu. The Khuffs, both of them, should be worn after a complete wudu. Therefore, if someone washed one foot, then put on its khuff, the khuff for that foot, like his right foot, for example. Then wash the second foot and put on the next khuff. It is not valid for him to wipe upon them instead of washing the feet, because he did not wear both of them after a complete purification. So in order to wipe on your khuffs, you need to make a complete wudu. And then put on your khuffs. Now, what if a person did wash one foot and then put on the first khuff, and then wash the second foot and then put on the second khuff? What he needs to do is take off the first khuff and then put it back on. If he does that, now he can wipe on his khuffs because he will have put them both on after a complete purification. If that's not clear, let me know. The rule is that in order to wipe on your khuffs, you have to wear them after a complete wudu. Wear both of them after a complete wudu. So if a person washed his right foot and then put on his right khuff, and then washed his left foot and then put on his left khuff, it's not valid for him to wipe on these khuffs. But what he can do, if he did that, is take off the first khuff that he put on and then just put it right back on. Just take it off and put it on. If he does that, then he will have worn both of his khuffs after a complete wudu. And then he can wipe on them. It is also a condition that they cover the amount of the foot that one is obligated to wash. Therefore, they must cover the ankles. However, it is not a condition that they be tied or sealed. Nor is it a condition that they are not transparent. It is not a condition that they are not transparent. That means if the foot can be seen through the footgear, it doesn't render the footgear invalid. Actually, it's not invalid. One can wipe upon them even if his feet are exposed from the top and even if his feet can be seen through the khuff. They must be, however, sealed from the soles and the sides. So this is what some scholars said about the khuff. This is a useful statement. They said the case of the khuff is the opposite for the case of covering the aura. In two ways. How is that? One way is that when it comes to covering the aura, whatever you use to cover your aura, it has to conceal the skin and hair color. If it doesn't conceal the skin and hair color, then that's not a valid cover for the aura. The khuff, on the other hand, does not have to conceal the skin and hair color to be a valid khuff. That's one perspective where they're reversed or opposite. The other, which is more significant, is that the khuff has to be sealed from the bottom and from the sides and not from the top. That's the opposite of the aura, the cover for the aura. The cover for the aura has to be concealed or sealed, has to be sealed from the top and the sides, but not from the bottom. Okay? So the khuff has to be sealed from the bottom, that's the sole, and from the sides, but not from the top. So that means if the top of your footgear was open and you could look down in there and see your foot, that's valid. It's still valid for the khuff. You don't have to seal it from the top. It needs to be sealed from the bottom and the sides. That's the reverse of the cover for the aura. The cover for the aura has to be concealed from the, or has to be sealed from the top and the sides, but not from the bottom. If the person's aura was covered from the top, sealed from the top and the sides, but was open from the bottom and their aura could be seen from underneath, that's not invalid. MashaAllah. If the conditions are all fulfilled, then he may wipe over his khuffs instead of washing his feet. He wipes by having a wet hand and doing what is called wiping over the top of the khuff. He does what's called wiping. So what that means is whatever action is, it is valid to apply this word wiping to that action. If you can take this word wiping and apply it to that action, then that action is valid for the khuff. If the conditions are fulfilled, he may wipe over his khuffs instead of washing his feet. He wipes by having a wet hand and doing what is called wiping over the top of the khuff. It is better to spread the fingers and leave lines when wiping. If one is a resident, he can wipe his khuffs for a day and a night after he finished invalidating his wudu. Meaning, when does your day and night, your 24 hours of wiping start? Your 24 hours of wiping starts when you finish invalidating your wudu. The traveler may do so for 3 days and nights. If he takes them off after breaking his wudu, if they rip, if the time limit runs out, or if he must perform a ghusl, it is no longer valid to wipe on the khuffs. So what stops you from wiping the khuffs? What invalidates wiping the khuffs? Taking them off after breaking the wudu, or even taking off one of them. If you take off one of them, you can't wipe either of them. Or if they rip, meaning if they become unsuitable, like they're not sealed from the bottom and the sides anymore. Or if they get a hole in them, for example. Or if the time limit runs out. He did 24 hours if he was a resident, or 72 if he was a traveler. Or if he must perform a ghusl. He had his khuffs on, went to sleep, and woke up and has to take a ghusl. Now he has to wash his feet. He can't wipe on his khuffs. Khuffs. Then it is no longer valid to wipe on the khuffs. When a person washes his feet, he must go beyond the ankles, even very slightly, as much as a fingernail, as we mentioned before, to ensure that he washed all the obligatory amount. Any question? He said just dropping water on the khuff or tapping their hand on the khuff with a wet hand is not enough. Would one need to physically wipe? If a person placed his wet hand on the khuff without moving it, that's valid. Amin wa fikum. He said, what is the case if someone takes off the khuff while having wudu? Does this invalidate the use of the khuff? No. Because if he never broke his wudu after he put his khuffs on, then he hasn't, if you want, activated the khuffs yet. So he can take them off and put them back on as much as he wants. He's still going on his original wudu. So when he wants to break his wudu, that's when he puts his khuffs on and he keeps them on. He puts his khuffs on, then he breaks his wudu, and then he activates his khuffs. And now he needs to keep them on if he wants to wipe on them. And he has the known time limit. Yes, go ahead. He said in another case, he makes wudu, keeps the khuffs on, then he breaks his wudu. So he makes wudu while having the khuffs on. That is wet wiping it. Correct. What if after this he takes off his khuffs? Then he has to wash his feet only. If his wudu was because of the khuffs, then he has to only wash his feet. Amin wa fikum. The author said the sixth integral is to observe the aforementioned order, i.e. the mentioned sequence of integrals as they came in the Book of Allah and in the Sunnah. Therefore, the first washing of the face and the intention must be simultaneous, and no other integral may precede them. Any part of the face washed before the intention must be repeated afterwards. Wiping the head and washing the feet cannot precede washing the arms. Washing the feet cannot come before wiping the head. Any part done out of order is not valid and must be repeated in its proper place. And Allah knows best.